Congratulations. I'm so happy that you guys are here. For those of you who do not know me, my name is Arusa Ralph. I'm a real estate broker with RE/MAX Presidential in South Florida, and I'm 2018 Florida Realtors speaker and an education ambassador, and I'm super excited to be here to introduce you to our top speaker, Miss Betsy Barbeau. Round of applause for Miss Betsy Barbeau. She is phenomenal, guys. I want to give you guys a quick background about Miss Betsy. Betsy Barbeau is an expert in Florida Community Association Management, or as known as CAM, training, and has taught thousands of community association managers and directors. Appointed by Governor Rick Scott in 2013, she served on the Regulatory Council for CAMs. Betsy is also an expert witness and was named twice by the Journal and as a distinguished women of the industry. Round of applause for Miss Betsy Barbeau. Without further ado, let's welcome Miss Betsy.
Thank you. Thank you. And I think my handout is on your mobile app. Is that right, Arusa?
Yes. Absolutely. So you can go ahead and take pictures of her slide this afternoon, and the handout that Miss Betsy is referring to, if you have already downloaded the 2018 Florida Realtors app, you can access that handout and download it on our app. Okay?
Good. Thank you. Yep. Well, community association living. Anybody live in a homeowners association or condo association? Oh, condolences. Anybody happen to be on your board of directors? Oh, real condolences. Okay. I probably am the only person here today who is not a realtor. Somebody asked me at lunch, how's real estate business in Leesburg? I have no idea. But I can tell you that everywhere around us there are community associations that are being built. And it seemed that about 10 years ago, we found out that management of a community association community is recession-proof. Selling real estate is not recession-proof, but managing is. Our communities took a lot of hits during the crash, but they still had to have professional management. So a lot of you got your CAM licenses, too, because that makes a really good license, especially in different parts of the state. I know over in the Panhandle and anybody in the St. Augustine area, those real estate licenses with the CAM license make a real good pair because of the way they live. But let's talk about community associations. And one of the hardest things is that I'm afraid that when we say words like condo or HOA, and I'm used to also teaching about cooperatives, so I'm probably going to say cooperatives, and you may not have a clue what that is, but that's just another kind of community association. But when we talk about condos, co-ops, HOAs, I'm afraid that what you see in your head is a building. I'm afraid that what you see is a building. And you cannot tell by looking at either of these buildings if it's a condo, co-op, or HOA. It could be one of all three. It could be all three. So when I say condo, co-op, or HOA, this is what I see. I see paper. This actually is a condominium. This is a co-op, and this is the HOA. So actually when we are talking, well, we're just going right through the slides right there. So actually when we're talking about community associations, we're actually talking about paper. We are a paper-driven industry. You cannot tell from the, thank you, Arusa, you cannot tell from the structure of the building what it is. Because I'll have people write me or call me and say, I live in a townhouse, and blah, 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 what about this? I say, stop. I don't know what you mean by townhouse. Is it a condo? Is it a co-op? Is it an HOA? And they'll say, well, I don't know. It's a townhouse. What would a townhouse be? I said, it could be a condo, a co-op, or an HOA. So you have to look at the paperwork, which means that transmitting that paperwork from us to you, to the buyer, you're usually the go-through person, that if we have those papers to give, we're going to give them to you to pass on to the buyers, because they really need to know what kind of community they're living in. Anybody have the experience of coming from, or have you had a client that has come from rural Indiana and moved into a condo association, and then somebody told them they couldn't put a wreath on their door. Yeah, you know, and it's like, well, it's my home. I can put a wreath on the door. No, you can't, because you don't own the outside of the door. And that's just a real hard concept for somebody who's come from rural Indiana and has lived on 30 acres, right? It's just kind of a hard concept. So in Florida, when you move into what we call a deed-restricted community, a condo, co-op, or HOA, and actually, believe it or not, timeshare is also in our lump of communities. But when you move into those, you do actually give up some of your rights to do with your property what you want to do. You may have to have a certain roofing material or exterior paint if it's a home. You might not be able to hang a wreath on your door if it's a condominium association. There are restrictions on the flags, which does not mean that our communities are unpatriotic. It's just that in some cases you've given up certain little bits of those rights to do with your stuff, what you want to do. So we're paper-driven. Each of the communities that you sell in will have a whole big collection of these. Most all of us, we call ourselves CAMs, Community Association Managers. I like your shawl. It's an American flag. It's great. Most of our all of our community associations have this set of papers that are very hard to understand. And if we had time, we could go through each of those and what they are, because they actually have there are about 4 main documents in there, and they actually have a hierarchy of which one supersedes the other. So they actually have a hierarchy, which you all already know about unauthorized practice of law. We have that too. So there are certain things that I could say it's this way, and this way, but then I would be practicing law without a license. So anyway, have to be careful about that too. So we are paper-driven, and most of the community, I do accidentally manage a couple of little communities, don't laugh, Joe, that have nobody to help them. They just wanted someone to help them. Can somebody just do our books and do our annual meetings and elections? And I said, oh, okay, it can't be much to do. Because I'm a school, I'm a training company, I'm a trainer, I don't manage. But anyway, now that they have someone who's responsive, it feels like I have 14,000 emails, that go with this little bitty community. I would very gladly pass these documents on to you electronically, which I do when you ask for estoppels for your closings. I pass on all of these documents. They're all now electronic, so we don't have these big wads of paper that you have to have. All I ask is please pass them on to the buyer. Please pass them on to the buyer. Just hit forward. All of our community associations have the same purpose. And been kind of chit-chatting with some of you through the lunch hours, sitting on the sofas and things. Tara's back there somewhere. And there you are. And all communities have a certain mission. The boards of directors don't always know it. So I understand about condo commandos and board members that have kind of run amok and make up their own rules. I was hearing about a couple of board members making up their own rules and acting unilaterally just about 30 minutes before this session. So I know that they make up their own rules, but there truly is what I would call a presumed statutory mission statement for all of our community associations. And if you take a quick trip with me in time, we're going to go back in time, and I want to just give you this real quick so that you can kind of see the world that we have to live in and work within. And then, like you, our laws change every year. July 1st, we get a whole bunch of new laws that either deleted some of the old ones or added to the ones we already have. So our laws get more and more and more. And would you believe, I know you can't believe this, but our legislators cannot be consistent. We have different laws for condominiums, we have different laws for co-ops, and we have different laws for HOAs and timeshare. So when managers are coming through the preliminary classes, learning, doing the prep class to become a CAM, they have to learn all 4, all at the same time, long enough to pass a test. The test, I understand, is not nearly as hard as yours, but it's still pretty challenging. If you go back, I am a Leesburg, Florida native. This is a Florida accent. This is a real Florida accent. So I want to go back to Florida, this part of Florida, I'm going to go way back, like the 1960s. Back in those days, we did not have this thing called a developer. So back in the 60s, that thing hadn't been invented yet, not here in Central Florida. We had builders, and in our little neighborhoods, the neighborhoods had names, but they didn't have signs. But you knew the name of the neighborhood that you lived in. Our neighborhood had a street, paved street. It had sidewalks and streetlights. I don't know how they got there, but they did. As you drove down the street, you could tell that each house was built by a different builder. You could tell that this was the Sam Powell Construction Company, this was the Clell Coleman Construction Company, and that person built their own. You could kind of tell. We did not have the word amenities. That word did not exist. We did not have the phrase lifestyle living. That didn't exist. Instead, we had words like swimming pool. If you had a pool, you had a pool. If you had a jungle gym or a swing set, you had your own. They weren't community pools or swing sets, but we all used them. Eventually, the streets and the sidewalks and the streetlights needed to be fixed. So our parents are knocking on the doors of the city council and the county commissioners saying, fix our streets and sidewalks. And the cities and the counties are going, gee, well, if we fix them, who pays for it? Does the city pay for it? Does the county pay for it? Do the owners pay for it? How does that happen? If we put that dilemma on pause in time, put that on pause, let's go to South Florida in the 1960s. And in those days, there was this thing born called a developer. And by golly, he bought a city block, built an apartment building on it, filled it full of renters, and then said, ugh, I do not want to be in the landlord business. And then he said, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to turn this thing into condos and sell them. Now think about it, in the early 60s, with very little legislation, very little regulation, can you imagine the misunderstandings and possibly abuses, misuses of the money and the assets during those early days? Can you imagine? Now just pause here for just a minute. Now think about it. For like 6,000 years in history, everyone has always owned dirt, right? I mean, that's how we own stuff, is dirt. Now, here he is wanting to sell stacked air. 18 stories up, he's going to sell stacked air. You get the stacked air on the 15th floor. Can you imagine the questions that the brokers, the mortgage brokers had, the banks had? Can you imagine the questions that the insurance companies had? You want a mortgage on air? You want insurance on the air inside your unit and it's not a rental unit? Yeah. Well, I think there were a whole lot of dilemmas and a whole lot of issues in those early days. And the folks in South Florida had money. So they hired attorneys who hired lobbyists who began then to promulgate the laws so that literally through the decades, literally, and up until this past July 1st, they created laws that seemed to me to be, well, let me see if you'll agree with this. Would you sort of agree that law is reactive more than it is proactive? Probably in your industry it's the same way too. Something goes wrong and you make a law for it. Well, I think that the laws that we operate under are more of a reaction to the things that went wrong. So here's what the legislators said starting in the 60s. And they said, and oh, by the way, you homeowner associations, we're going to get you caught up in this law. It'll take a decade or two to fold you into the law, but we'll get you caught into this law and catch you up into it. And so the legislator said, okay, Mr. Developer, from now on, you cannot build one of these communities or take this building and convert it from an apartment building to a condo. You can't do that, Mr. Developer, until you first create a Florida-specific corporation. And that corporation is going to be specific as in, is it a condo corporation? Is it a co-op corporation or is it an HOA corporation? Now in Florida, you all would already know this, that in Florida every corporation has a board of directors. Well, think about it. We don't have anybody yet. We haven't turned to shovel the dirt yet. We don't have anybody. But you have to have a board of directors in order to have a corporation. So the developer, with his development company, he creates a corporation. He names some of his staff, most likely, as that initial board of directors. So if any of you live in those communities and you look back in those original articles of incorporation, you'll see 5 people's names that you don't know and who have never lived there. Because he probably named himself, his wife, his CEO, his CFO, and attorney or somebody. So there'll be 5 people who will be that initial board of directors. And if you look through some of those original papers, it talks about the developer-appointed board or the developer-controlled board. And that's who this board is that they're talking about. So we have a specific Florida corporation. It's Condo Co-op HOA. Condo Co-op HOA and timeshare. It has a board of directors, and the legislator said, now, Mr. Developer, in these papers, when you create these, you have to say at least 3 things in the papers. You have to first make this corporation responsible for the protection of the property and its value. You have to then do that by doing 2 other things. This corporation is responsible for the protection of the property and its value by maintaining the common elements and the common areas. So this corporation is to maintain the things that are used in common. And, I thought I had it here. There it is. And maintain the things that are used in common. And by the way, Mr. Developer, in your papers, what are the things that are used in common? Is there a clubhouse? Is there a pool? What about streets, street lights? What about tennis courts, shuffleboard courts, those kinds of things? Also, this corporation will be made responsible for protecting the property and its value by enforcing the restrictions in the governing documents. So, by the way, what are they? Put those in the documents. So if you can't hang a wreath on your door, if you have to have a certain exterior paint color or roofing material, that's what will be, and those will be the restrictions. That gives every community in the state of Florida a 3-fold statutory mission statement. This is the purpose of the board of directors, is to make sure that the property is protected, which unwritten here means the property is protected and its value protected at any cost. Which means when your buyers move in, they have just signed a blank check saying, I will pay whatever my share is for these 3 things. I will pay whatever it takes to protect the property and its value, maintain the things that are used in common, and enforce the restrictions in the governing documents. Now, I know that if you tell them that, they won't buy. But they actually have signed a blank check when they move in saying, I'll pay whatever my share is. Boards of directors do their best to keep the assessments low, but you still have to fund the budget. And the more you have and the fewer units you have, then the more you pay. It just becomes math at this point. One of my little communities is only 20 units, but it's 8 buildings. That's 8 roofs. That's 8 roofs. So their assessments are kind of high because we've got 8 tile roofs that we have to maintain and plan for replacement. That's a lot for 20 people. That's a lot. The other thing that we have are a lot of departments and bureaus, which you do too. We are also under the DBPR, under the Division of Professions, which you are too. We also then are subject to I'll get it in a minute. Sorry, those of you who are trying to take pictures. We're also over here under the Division of Condominiums. They are the ones who oversee and enforce the boards of directors. And when owners have complaints about those actions of the boards of directors, that's where those complaints are filed. But it's only complaints against condominiums, condominium boards. At this point, homeowner association boards are not under the jurisdiction of the Division of Condominiums. So if a homeowner has a complaint about a homeowner association board, they are probably out on their own for out-of-pocket expenses for mediation and then subsequent lawsuits. So we really want homeowner associations to be brought under that umbrella of protection, so to speak, but not there yet. And I could tell you a whole big story of why they're not there yet. We have a lot of documents that's in this collection. Mostly, we have, of course, U.S. Constitution, Florida Constitution. We've got the Florida statutes, which you do. We have the Florida Administrative Code, which you do. But then each of our communities has a collection of documents that they can be changed. They can be changed, but it takes quite a big vote of the owners to change them. And it's expected that the board of directors will comply with them, that they will comply with all the statutes, Florida Administrative Code, and with the governing documents. And actually, board members now, started with condo, it's now co-op and HOA, for about the last 10 years, board members are required to be certified. And they can certify two ways. They can take a class, which I have, or they can self-certify, which we in the industry call the perjury statement, because they're saying that they have read all their documents and they understand them all, and they will faithfully discharge their duties. So we call that perjury. That's what we call that. I'm going to show you my family, and then I'm going to open the floor up for questions and answers. Rusa has the microphone, but I want to hear from you. What else do you need to know that will help you in what you do? This is my son, Adam, and his lovely wife, Chastity, and my darling grandson, Rhett. And so there is my family. That is his first turkey, and that is him wishing me happy birthday. And now, the rest of the time is yours. You tell me what you want to know, and let me see if I can answer it for you. Arusa is going to run around. Raise your hand. Anything's fair game.
Any questions on associations, condos, the laws, bylaws, her documents? I'm sure you guys have tons of questions for Miss Betsy. We also have her business cards, so if you did want one, let me know. I'll pass them around. Question? I'll come up to her first here. And if you could just stand up, say your name, and these sessions are being recorded for those who could not have attended.
Hi, I'm Kathy Palmer. I'm from the Sarasota Bradenton Realtors. And we don't deal with it a ton where I am, but the 55 and up communities, when you have people that are like 52 or, how do we do that if they're not 55, but maybe they want to own in there? I don't know if it's specific to each condo, or if there's some general law that, that you can kind of work with them. Thank you.
The over 55 is can I say document driven? Can I say document driven, and you'll know what I mean? It depends on what their specific papers say. But in general, the over 55, to be considered on the National Registry for the over 55 communities, which takes a lot of documentation. Every 2 years you have to go around and get everybody's driver's license and verify birthdays and all that kind of stuff. But to be on the registry, your community has to be at least 80% occupied, not owned. Not owned. It's at least 80% occupancy of 55 plus. So, but Kathy, there are some that would be 90 or 100. Their documents would say that they're 100%. But to be on the National Registry, it's 55 plus. So there are people in 55 plus communities who live there who are under 55, but they fall in that 20%. My understanding, what she's asking about is if you want to buy into a community that's plus 55, but you're not 55. I think, now it's just I don't have an actual definitive answer, but I would say you could probably buy it because the standard is occupancy. It's occupant, not owner. Occupant versus owner. So my belief would be that unless their documents say something else, that you could buy in it, you just might not be able to live there.
Does that answer your question, Kathy? Great. Any more questions for Miss Betsy? I'm going to come to the back, and then if you could just stand up and say your name.
I just wanted to talk about it really quick. So then with the person that
Use the microphone.
Sorry, I just want to tag on that really quick. So if you buy it as an investment property, does the person who's renting it out from you have to be 55 and up?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. Driver's license.
Driver's license.
You
yeah.
have to you have to prove your age in those communities.
Right. Any more questions?
Oh, Joe's going to ask me a loaded one.
I am. I'm going to just kick your butt. No. Jolita Brizano, Flagler County. Hey, Betsy, what's going on with the community development districts? They're becoming big, hot, and heavy. And a lot of realtors don't understand that these are communities where the people also have to pay assessments in the form of taxes.
The CDDs, the community development districts, are different than community associations. Those are governmental, I guess you would say, funded by tax bonds, I believe, which then you pay, for which you pay. The boards of directors of those are elected officials. They're elected, so they may not even live in your community. That is a different entity. They usually come in, Joe, my understanding, and are what builds the infrastructure, the streets and the utilities and things like that. And they could do amenities. So this is outside of the scope of a community association. I mean, they go together, but it's not one of our kinds of communities. In our community associations, what constitutes a community association for us is that it's residential, which a CDD is not. It is mandatory membership. In other words, when you sign your closing documents, you are a part of that corporation, whether you know it or not or like it or not. And number 3, you have to pay an assessment for your part of the threefold mission statement. And number 4, if you don't pay your assessment, then we will lien your property and literally take your property from you. And it doesn't matter whether you have a loan on it or not. So to be a community association, it's residential, mandatory membership. There is an assessment to pay. And if you don't pay, we will take your home from you.
Betsy, a couple of questions that I just jotted down from some of the members here is, what would you say is the primary difference between a co-op, a condo association, and a homeowners association? If you can elaborate just a little bit on that, please.
I can elaborate a lot. In a condominium association, all right, I have to use my hands to draw. Let's have a building, 32 units in it. If you look at a deed to one of those units, what you're going to see, the deed says that Bob and Sally Smith own Unit 20B of ABC Condominium Association, and then it says, including an undivided share in the common elements of ABC Condominium Association, right? That's what the deed says in a condominium association. What Bob and Sally may or may not know is that they own, when it says Unit 20B, it's airspace. It's floor covering, wall covering, ceiling covering in. That's what Bob and Sally Smith own. So let's pretend, and if I could run over there, I would, but I won't. But if I could run over there, I'll get Arusa to point. Pretend that this is the inside of your unit. What is the wall covering likely to be? Paint. Minute. We're going minute. What's floor covering? Tile or concrete, or no, carpet, starts with C, carpet or wood. And pretend the ceiling, what would the ceiling be? Popcorn and paint? Okay, so Bob and Sally own popcorn and paint or tile or wood or wallpaper and carpet over here. Anything in. Right, anything in. So they would own the baseboard, they would own the switch plates, they would own the canisters, the lights, the fixtures, the cabinets, the, I'm thinking what goes with cabinets. Appliances, cabinets, countertops, they would own all of that. But that other phrase says, including an undivided share in the common elements of ABC Condominium Association. So let's pretend that that's our balcony and our sliding glass door. So go that way past the paint. What's past the paint? Drywall. What's past that? Studs. Then we've got insulation, wiring, plumbing, then the exterior wall, then our balcony railing, okay? Balcony railing, use your imagination and go with me here. Drop down to the ground. We're on the second floor. What's probably down there? Grass, sidewalk, dirt, paving, parking. Now use your imagination. Keep going with me. And we're going to then drive on around, take our car, and there's the clubhouse and the pool and the jacuzzi and the shuffleboard court out to the gate that goes to the county road, right? Okay? What if we go this way? We're on the top floor. What's this way? We've got subceiling. We've got rafters, insulation, roofing material. We've got the plyboard, the paper, the tile on the roof. Go between units. Paint, go between units. That next unit over there, we've got paint and what? Drywall. Then we've got studs and insulation, and then we've got probably more drywall and paint on their side, right? Okay, all that other, for lack of a better word, stuff, all that stuff, since we have 32 units in this building, then 1/32 of the pool is on this deed, 1/32 of the roof is on this deed, 1/32 of the drywall is on this deed. So all the owners own 1/32, in my brain's economy, of everything else in this community. If you go to the Public Records Office and research the deeds related to the property, you only find 32 deeds, one for each of the units. There is no deed in the name of ABC Condominium Association. It owns nothing, but it is responsible for all of the maintenance and the insurance and protecting the property and its value and those things. So in a condominium association, you own air. Now, co-op is different, and this crunches your brain. The co-op law is written as if it's a building. But most co-ops in Florida are mobile home parks. And these are usually nice, high-end mobile home parks. I deal with a whole lot of them. There's a whole bunch of them in the Sarasota, Bradenton, Ellington area, and then all the way across to Cocoa Beach. There's a whole stretch of them through the belly of the state there. And so let's take a mobile home park, and let's have a tract of land. We've got 50 spots on it. And we're going to say that it's owned by the evil landlord. The evil landlord owns it. And so we've got 50 pads. The mobile home owners own their mobile home, right? Okay, that's what our scenario is going to be. They own their mobile home, but they rent the pad, right? So he calls them renters, but they call themselves owners. So we're going to call them owner-renters. The evil landlord decides to sell the park. He's going to sell the park. It has one deed in the name of evil landlord. So he's going to sell the park. The statutes, Chapter 719, gives the owners the right to purchase the park. And you can imagine that that's giving them the ability to keep their home where it is and not have much change for them. In order to purchase the park, they will need to exercise that option to purchase the park. They will create XYZ Cooperative Association. 32 of them have the means and ability to do that. So 32 out of these owner-renters create XYZ Cooperative Association. Those 32 will, in the name of XYZ Cooperative Association, will exercise the right to purchase the park. They will make a capital contribution. Each owner-renter will make a capital contribution to XYZ Cooperative Association in an amount that will be equal to whatever the down payment is going to be for the mortgage on the property. So this is going to be substantial. So this could be a $50,000, $60,000, $80,000, $90,000 contribution each into the corporation for the down payment to get the mortgage to purchase the park. In exchange for that contribution, they receive a share. So those 32 are now called shareholders. They're now called shareholders. That entitles them to the exclusive use through the signing of a proprietary lease, the exclusive use of the pad that they're on, the space that they're on. This proprietary lease is recorded in the public records, just like a deed is. It has similar legal weight, legal effect as a warranty deed. It's just not a warranty deed, nor is it a lease. It's proprietary in that it has ownership in it with the word proprietary. So these 32 proprietary leases are recorded in the public records along with the one deed that transferred from Evil Landlord to XYZ Cooperative Association. If I went to the Public Records Office and looked at the documents related to this community, I would find one deed in the name of XYZ Cooperative Association. It owns the tract of land. And I would find 32 proprietary leases for the exclusive use of that space that they're on. But how many pads did we have in the park? No, we had 50. We had 50. So what about that other 18? Those 18 are still owner-renters. They now make their rent check out to XYZ Cooperative Association every month instead of Evil Landlord. And they have rental agreements that would be in a file in the drawer, in the office someplace. If you convert that to a building, that's an easy conversion. We've got an apartment building of 50. The landlord wants to sell the apartment building. 32 of the apartment renters wad themselves up into a cooperative association that will exercise the right to purchase the building. They become shareholders by the building, and the other 32 are still renters. Kathy, before you even ask, some communities will cut off sales of shares and keep those 32, and that's it, as shareholders, and those 18 will be rental income for the community, and then others will continue to try to sell those 18 out so that everyone in the community is a shareholder. And when you drive by, they have it on the sign, 100% resident owned. It'll say 100% resident owned. They're so daggone proud of buying their property. Yes, sir, we've got a question here.
And the last one was the Homeowner Association. Questions? Go ahead.
No. The 32 that bought the shares, they don't pay rent. The 32 that bought the shares, it's sort of like they paid it up front. Well, they will sell their share. Their share has value, and there are share value adjustments periodically to make sure that it has kept up with the market. So that the 18 will pay rent, which will be significantly higher than what the shareholders are paying monthly because they're just paying an assessment. So there'll be a difference in the amount of money that's paid. Yes, and then when the shareholders sell, they will sell their share and their mobile home. So they'll sell their share in their mobile home.
Any more questions for Betsy?
So anything to clarify? There's one way back there. Yes,
Let me go back there. If you could just stand up, say your name. These sessions are recorded, so everybody in the room can hear your question. Thank you.
Jackie Robertson, Venice, Florida. On those shareholders, they can vote, right? But the renters can't.
Correct. The shareholders are members of the mandatory association, so they would be the voters. The renters would not be.
I have two other questions. One is a clarification. If the 55 plus is not registered, then they don't have to follow the 80% rule. Is that correct?
I don't know how they would be 55 plus then.
If they claim they're 55 plus, but they're not on the register?
I would have to see what their documents say.
Okay.
Somewhere in their they can't just claim to be 55 plus. It has to be on paper somewhere.
Okay. And then my last question, how do you recommend you work with some of these associations when you have to try to get information from them, from the insurance company or from the buyer, and you call the management company and they don't call you back and they're very difficult to work with?
That's kind of a segue of where we were going to go. Can you remind me of that in just a minute? And let me finish with a description of the Homeowners Association. Okay. Up until this point, what I've described is owning air. Condo, you're owning air. And in a co-op, you're owning air. It's easy to see in an apartment, but the way I see the air in a mobile home park is kind of like a bubble over the lot that the mobile home is on. In a homeowners association, we are finally back to owning real dirt. And your dirt is described as a lot number or a meets and bounds description. And everybody's dirt butts up against somebody else's dirt. And so let's say we've got lots here, and everybody owns everything on their dirt up to the sky. So we don't have the thought of an inside or outside of a building. It's just either on your dirt, or it's your dirt or your dirt. Or each of our dirts has a driveway that goes out to the street. So the dirt that the street is on, the dirt then that would be where the clubhouse is, the pool, the shuffleboard courts, jacuzzi, all of that out to the gate, all of that dirt is surveyed out and put on a 33rd deed in the name of Royal Oak Estate Homeowners Association. All of the dirt then in the community is accounted for on a deed somewhere. So if we went to the Public Records Office, we would see that there are 33 deeds for this community, one for each of our 32 owners who owns dirt, and then one for the rest of the property. So we have the three different forms that Arusa asked me to describe. Any comments or questions on those?
Yes. Can you the difference between a PUD and an HOA?
PUD.
Together or separate?
A PUD is a planned unit development, and that again would be more like that CDD. It's in combination, but I don't have enough information to know how that. We as managers and the boards don't deal with them. You might be a planned development, but that's on the developer end. That's on the developer end. Question over here.
Question.
Molly and I, regarding the HOA estoppel fee, the cap at $250, is that true? Because what I'm seeing now is the HOAs are now just charging a different fee and naming it something else, so they're hitting the $250 and then they're doing a paperwork fee or a storage fee or something like that.
There is a new statutory estoppel form. And you all are still using yours and sending them to us, and I'm not using your forms. I'm sending you back the ones that are the correct ones. But there is now a full-page estoppel form that requires us to provide a whole lot more information than we ever provided before, which sort of goes to your question earlier in that we're to provide the name of the insurance agent on the estoppel form, any open violations, several other things. We have to attach the last statement. We've got to name some other things on there. Do they get a garage space? Do they have leasehold? It's almost like our frequently asked questions and answer sheet now, is almost what it's like. But the fee now for estoppels is $250. I was only charging $60. I'm making money now. Yeah. And you can charge, the preparer can charge a $100 transfer fee if it's in the documents or the management contract. So my estoppel fees are $350. There's the $250 for the estoppel and then the $100 for the transfer fee because it's built into my management contract. If there's a rush, there's an extra fee that you can charge. If there's a delinquent amount, there's, I believe, $150 extra that you can charge when there's a delinquent amount. Then if you have any other things that are requested that would need to come from the attorney, those are additional amounts. There's also a scale, which I have on your handout that will be in your app, but I have the scale in case investors are selling multiple units. There's a scale for the fee. So there's a scale of, if it's under 25 units, it's 25 and more, it's whatever, then it's 26 to 50, then 50, if they're selling multiple units.
Betsy, I reached out to the audience. As a real estate agent, where can an agent access the bylaws or the rules and regulations of these associations? Because many times their buyers are getting denied and they spend $100, $150 application fees Any tips for the real estate agents on where they can access a lot of this information so they know ahead of the game?
It's good. It's a good question. They're actually, depending on which counties you live in and how good their websites are, but these are all on public records. They're all public records. If you can get a copy of a deed or a title insurance policy, it'll reference the book and page number. And when you find the first one, the first book and page number, you should find them all. They should all be linked together. In Lake County, where I live, our property appraiser's office website is delightful. It is the easiest thing to work through. And I can just pull up a community neighborhood. I can go into one of the deeds that's there. I can scroll down. It will take me to the book and page number where that deed was recorded, and then all I have to do is look at that deed, and right on the face of it, it will have that in the legal description. It'll have subject to this book and page number that are here. And then I go back to the public records, to the clerk's office, and plug that in, and hopefully they come up.
I believe we have a question over here. Question.
Marcy Rogo, Naples, home of more condominiums and associations than you can throw a stick at. The last 2 weeks I've been working with tenants and trying to find vacation rentals. And I have found that homeowners associations in some of these buildings have created rules that are absolutely to the point of ridiculous. Like, if you're going to be a tenant, you must fly there for a personal interview. Not only you, but your spouse and any guest that you would ever have come to visit must fly there for a personal interview, no FaceTime. And a guest now cannot, if they come and use it for a week or whatever, come to visit you, may not use any of the facilities because that would mean that the homeowners who are there wouldn't have a lounge chair. Is there any way that someone who lives in a condominium like that, because it's very restrictive and they just looked at me and said, you can tell we don't want people to rent here, do they have any recourse whatsoever? The answer is none. Okay, so the second one is
the answer to that question was no.
Yeah, I figured. So the second one is the wonderful little discussion about animals.
How much time do we have left?
So
there's a session after this one.
Emotional, animals, or the ones that are valid. So a building said, no, you cannot bring your animal that you need to help you, guide you, everything else licensed into it. They threatened him HUD and finally got in. But what about the emotional support animals? What are we going to do about some of that stuff?
It's called SOL. So out of luck. So out of luck. And this might have to be our last question here. The pets are a problem, and I love pets, but one of the rights that you give up, perhaps, when you move into a deed-restricted community is the right to have a pet. That could be one of those rights that you give up. Those should be clearly stated in the documents. They're public records. They're open to view. You should be able to know any of that before you move in. However, between the Fair Housing Act over here with the emotional support and the ADA over here with the service animal, the service animal statute is easier to implement and easier to understand and follow. There are only two service animals, period. A miniature horse or a dog. That's all that a service animal is. A miniature horse or a dog. It is trained to perform a life-giving, life-saving, physical, functional duty for the person. It identifies low blood sugar. It is seizures. Thank you. Help me out here. It can be the mobility for the person. Over here in the ADA, the service animal, if you think of a wheelchair and where a wheelchair can go, where all the places a wheelchair can go, onto the pool deck, into the elevator, that's where a service animal can go. Service animal is not a pet. You don't leave them in your room in Orlando and go to Disney for the day and leave the do not disturb sign. This animal never leaves your side. It never leaves your side. It is your life giving blood, so to speak. However, we've got the emotional support over here. This is under the Fair Housing Act. And my understanding of how this got started was in those rentals. Because you can't discriminate against someone who has a disability, and that definition of disability used to be this long, and now it's this long of what a disability is. You can't ask what the disability is. You can't deny them whatever they need to go to help them with that disability. So what was happening in the communities that you could rent in, owners unknowingly were telling people, I can't rent to you because you have a dog or a boa or a parrot or a monkey or a mongoose or something. I can't rent to you because of that. And then they say, but I have a disability, so now you've just discriminated against me. So that with the lawsuits going on there, what ended up happening was the owners in a homeowners association or condo association who could rent where their rentals were allowed, they were getting sued, and so they were having to let the renters with the boa constrictor emotional support animal come in. Well, then the regular owners who moved here knowing that they couldn't have a pet are going like, what the heck? The renter can have a pet, but I can't have a pet. So what I'm hearing from the attorneys, and I work with attorneys all over the state, and what I'm hearing from them is they're saying, forget the pet rules. There's really not anything you can do about any of them. And right now what I'm seeing, I've seen some things coming from Delta Airlines of what they are now saying you can fly with as an emotional support animal. Until some of these bigger transit companies like railways and planes and things like that get the lawsuits going and get it defined, we're sort of okay over here with the ADA, but boy, we're not okay over here with the Fair Housing Act and the emotional support. The community that said that they absolutely would not allow the emotional support animal, tell them to check with their attorney because they're headed for a big lawsuit. Because I think that's going to be hard for them to deny at this point in the time of our culture right now. 2 more minutes.
Coming in. Oh, I'm sorry. Kathy Lewis, Sanibel Captiva Association. What about a buyer that has emotional support animals coming in to a condo or a homeowner association?
About a buyer coming in, if they've already got renters in there with emotional support, all I can say is that the board needs to check with their attorney before they turn that person down. They need to check with their attorney. What the attorneys that I'm hearing from say is just pretty much no pet rules. It's hard to enforce any pet rules right now, so check with your attorney on anything that has to do with pets. Don't go on anything that I've just said. Check with your attorney on everything with pets because it is so up in the air. And I think that we are finished.
Any final words?
Do I have any final words?
30 seconds.
30 seconds. Hello, I'm going to wave. I am yours forever. You have my contact information on your handout. Rusa has cards.
Yes. A big round of applause for Betsy Barbeau, please.